Jatras.
Okay. All righty. Good afternoon, everyone. We are going to start as close to on time as possible. We're going to go a little bit out of order. I know that we need 3 members for a quorum. We will have the 3rd member, but we really have only one item to vote on, and that is item number 4. Though we don't have a quorum, that's the item number that I'd like to go to, because Mr. Dan Jatras of the Office of Resilience and Sustainability is here, and members of the council, who is Helena Moreno at this time, our president. The reason that I have this on the agenda is because we're asked to authorize entering into a cooperative endeavor agreement. This one is a little bit more complex than some of the ones that we've seen, and I just wanted the public to be aware of it. So I'm asking Mr. Jatras to make a brief presentation, and then if we have a quorum, I'll call for a vote on this ordinance to just submit it to the council for consideration.
Councilmember, for purposes of the record, can we call roll?
Yes, let us call roll.
Councilmember Green?
Present.
Councilmember Moreno? Councilmember Giarrusso? Councilmember Harris? Councilmember King? Thank you.
Okay, doke. Mr. Jatras, if you can identify yourself for the council and also the public who's watching.
Sure thing. Good afternoon. Thank you, Councilmember Green, members of the committee. My name is Dan Jatras. I am with the city's Office of Resilience and Sustainability. I'm here to talk today about an ordinance under consideration that would authorize the execution of a cooperative endeavor agreement with 2 partners, Tool Design Group and Safe Streets Research and Consulting. The city applied for and was awarded a federal grant from the U.S. Department of Transportation's Safe Streets and Roads for All program. We applied in partnership with these 2 entities, Tool Design Group and Safe Streets Research. So they are named partners in the grant award. So this ordinance and the accompanying CEA is to put in place all the terms of our partnership as we move forward now and execute this funding agreement. So it's a CEA that in total is $435,000. Just make sure I'm saying the right numbers. $230,000 of that is for Tool Design Group, and they will be providing non-federal matching funds. Tool Design Group will be in the amount of $121,500, and Safe Streets Research, their portion of the CEA is $205,500, and they will be providing a non-federal match of $42,000. This portion of the grant award does not require any matching funds from the City of New Orleans. The scope of the project is to expand on and add functionality to a tool called the Safer Streets Priority Finder. This is a tool that the city and these partners actually developed a few years ago from a previous federal transportation grant award from the Safety Data Initiative. So that's why we applied for this new funding collaboratively together as a partnership to build on that previous product that we developed. This will be adding additional functionality that both the city will be able to use that tool in guiding identification and implementation of transportation safety projects, but it's also a tool that can be used by communities across the country. So that's the federal government's interest in supporting this project. So that is the summary of what the CEA would be accomplishing, and I'm happy to answer any questions that any members of the committee have.
I'm going to ask our council members have questions, but could you, in the simplest layman's terms, explain to the public that's watching what they will see after this completion?
Sure. As simple as possible, this tool, it takes various data, crash data, traffic data, et cetera, and the result is what's called a sliding window analysis that helps highlight roadway segments where we have the most concentrated issues with traffic fatalities or severe injuries, so that we can invest safety funds and get the biggest return on safety for that investment.
Thank you. That's kind of what I wanted to bring out of you so that the public could understand. We're going to be looking at areas where we've had fatalities and we've had injuries, and looking at a way that we can put in place whatever mechanisms could help to reduce that.
Exactly.
Yeah, so thank you very much. Councilmember Harris is here. Councilmember Harris, we're on item number 4, and this is Mr. Dan Jatras of the Office of Resilience and Sustainability.
I do have a couple questions
Yes.
for Dan. Dan, good to see you.
As well, Councilmember.
So this is going to focus on fatal crashes and serious crashes. Is that correct?
Yes, crashes with fatalities and severe injuries.
Okay, so there's so for example, there have been areas around my district where there have been just crashes that don't result necessarily in injury, but are often enough that people call on us for stop signs installed, et cetera. Is there any way to address those sorts of intersections with this study or in some other manner?
Yeah, so this tool doesn't exclude other crash types, but it's weighted in a way to really draw out those more severe crashes that result in severe injuries or fatalities. One aspect of the tool, though, as well, it's not just looking backwards at the history of crash data. It's also looking at roadway characteristics that can provide a predictive approach. So, you know, if intersection A has had crashes and it's identified as we could make a big impact by investing here, but maybe intersection B hasn't had crashes, but the tool identifies it has the same underlying conditions and therefore potentially the same risks, we can also know, let's make those same kind of investments at this location so that we can address those issues before it results in a crash.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Council President Moreno, any questions? As we do have a quorum at this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve the submission to this full council for approval of this ordinance, calendar number 34636. I'll say moved by Council Member Harris, seconded by Council President Moreno. Members, please vote your machines. We have 4 yeas, 4 present. So this will be submitted, and because it was unanimous and we have sufficient time, it'll be on the consent agenda for the 18th meeting.
All right.
Thank you for the
Thank you very much,
presentation.
council members.
And congratulations to the city and to these organizations for successfully applying.
Thank you.
Okay. At this time, because we have a quorum, I'll ask if I can receive a motion to approve the minutes which are in your package from the meeting that we last had on November the 30th. Moved by Councilmember President Elena Moreno, second by Councilmember Leslie Harris. Members, please vote your machines. 4 yeas, no nays. The minutes from the November 30th meeting are approved. At this time, we'll have an update on projects at our Louis Armstrong New Orleans International Airport from Mr. Kevin Dolio, the Director of Aviation of the New Orleans Aviation Board. Okay. Good afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon,
Good to see you again.
and thank you for the invitation to come down and just update you on some of the ongoings at the airport.
Could you identify for the public purposes who is with you?
Sure. Well, I'm Kevin Dolio, the Director of Aviation. To my right is Jamie McCluskey, the Deputy Director for Planning, Development, and Construction at the airport. And to my left is Aaron Burns. Aaron is the Director of Communications and Intergovernmental Relations at the airport. So I'm just going to tick through a few slides, talk a little bit about the recovery from the pandemic, and then towards the end, some projects the airport's embarking on, really an update on the master plan, more or less. And then another program we're involved in that's one of a national perspective. But just right off, the very first slide speaks to the level of passenger activity through the end of February of this year. That's the most current actual reports we have in from the airlines is the February numbers. So we have January, February. And through February of this year, we are actually tracking at 2.3% ahead of that same period year to date in 2019. So we were forecast to recover to 2019 numbers by this year. Appears we've hit it in February. Now, that will flux month to month. We'll go up and down, a little above, a little below 19 numbers, but what we really want to watch here and watch for is that the overall trend line, or the year-to-date number, should stay real close to 19 numbers from this point, and then by the end of the year start trending ahead of 2019. So February was a good month.
Could you just remind the public why we focus on 2019?
That was the last full year of activity just prior to the pandemic. We only had 2 months in 20, so 19 is the year that airports track against across the country. We've had some good news in the air service front. Spirit Airlines announced that beginning May 9th, nonstop service to San Juan, Puerto Rico. It's the first time in over 30 years that we've had that type service, or nonstop service to San Juan. And it is and was the highest unserved market out of here, outside of the domestic U.S. So it was a top destination we were trying to get, and Spirit's come through and providing the service. So that's a good one for the market.
Good news.
That'll start May 9th. Next page just reiterates what several carriers are doing, and Breeze Airways with their 10 destinations from here, holding steady. Frontier introducing service to Cleveland and Columbus and Indianapolis in May of 24. British Airways came back at 3 frequencies a week, went to 4, and is now going to 5 frequencies a week nonstop to London. Air Canada only served Toronto before the pandemic, came back serving Toronto, but also added Montreal twice a week, and they're bumping Montreal now to 3 times a week. Southwest Airlines expanded sent to San Diego and Long Beach on the West Coast, and will begin serving Burbank, California in June of 2024. Spirit, besides the announcement of San Juan, will also go back into the Baltimore market in May. And they also provide San Pedro Sula nonstop service in Cancun, Mexico, 3 times a week. Terminal concessions and how are they tracking at this point? If you look at year-end 2023, which came in 6% below the year numbers for 2019, the actual concession sales with 6% fewer passengers were actually up 27%, 2023 versus 2019. So the new program has done very well for the concessionaires in the program. We also, as you recall, a recent announcement that we were selected again in our tier of airports as one of 3 best airports in the U.S. or in North America. It's third year in a row that we've received that distinction from ACI's ASQ program. It's big recognition, and that touches survey of customers using your facility and touches the entirety of the operation, from access to the airport to parking to the check-in process, cleanliness of restrooms, the facility's ambiance overall. So it touches everything, and it's a quite good recognition to receive. The next slide you've seen before. It's updated, so we put it up again. The first line is the 3 years in a row recognition for best airport in North America. Then you had the J.D. Power. And what's significant on this slide, as I've indicated before, it crosses over not just customer service, not just the customer service front, but actually the finances of the airport and how you run it, with the most efficient airport in North America. Excuse me, my allergies kicked in. fastest airport pickup from Uber in 2022. The Public Relations Department has received significant recognition as well. So it's just good overall operation right now, and this recognition points to that. We are, as we reported in November, we have a master planning process that's underway, and we should go to the next slide. You saw this slide in November. At that time, I think we were 50% through the master plan. We're at about 75% through the master plan right now. We are transitioning from the alternatives analysis phase of this to the capital development, whereas we're agreeing, we're coming to conclusion on a preferred alternative for development of the airport over the next 20-year horizon. So we're working that now, and we're close to pulling out of the analysis phase into the capital development phase. So we're getting close, but by year end, the master plan will be complete. It's looking at, and you've seen this slide before, but just as a reminder, it's essentially looking at over that 20-year horizon with forecast traffic over that horizon, what we'll need in additional gates, additional terminal capacity, baggage capacity, roadway modifications potentially would increase traffic over that 20-year horizon, and the trigger points for additional parking facilities as well. So it touches all of that. It also is addressing and assisting us in coming to conclusions on intermodal projects with the Baton Rouge, New Orleans rail coming, and with an airport stop that's south of Airline Highway, south of the old facility, is how we connect, how we transport our customers from that stop around to the North Terminal, about a 5-mile trek around, initially with shuttles on the north-south connector roadway system, which will serve later as a platform for an APM system further down the road. So we're working all of that as well. It's a heavy lift. It'll take significant investment, and we're tapping a variety of different sources in the IIJA program for assistance in that regard. So that continues to move, continues to progress. We've received some initial grants for the connector roadway, for the north-south connector road. So we're well into design, and we'll soon move into the early phases of construction on that roadway project. Next thing I want to mention, of course, our airport and what we do here is very important. It's definitely a very critical regional asset. So we handle it with great care, and we're proactive in looking ahead and developing our airport to meet future needs. But we're also involved to extent in industry initiatives and national initiatives. And I just wanted to point out this last slide. When I stepped into the chair's role of ACINA, Airports Council International North America, in January, I became only the third African-American chair of that organization in its history. A good friend of mine, that's to the left on this photo, a gentleman named Perry Miller, the CEO of the Richmond Airport, is currently now also the chair of AAAE, the American Association of Airport Executives, only the second African-American chair in that organization in its history. Our overlap of terms, it's the first time in the history of the industry that both organizations had an African-American chair at the same time. We have come together and initiated a national initiative, already have 9 airports on board in a pilot program, whereby these type statements of only the second, only the third, first time in the history, will eventually be a thing of the past, And our program's geared to identifying in high school, moving through programs in universities. We'll have agreements with, and into airports that we have agreements with, to find, identify, prepare, and produce future leaders in the airport industry to increase over time the percentage of minority leadership in the industry, not just jobs, but leadership in the industry. So that program's being stood up now. We rolled it out and announced it in a national conference in Washington, D.C. About 3 weeks ago. It's a joint conference between AAAE and ACINA, so it was a perfect venue to introduce the program. Well received, and as I indicated, we were hoping to get 5 airports for our pilot program. 9 have signed on to the pilot program. So we'll keep you posted as that progresses and how it moves along, but it's airports involved from the Northeast to the West Coast to the central part of the country, large and small. The world's largest airport, Atlanta, is a part of the pilot program. We have all 3 Washington, D.C. area airports engaged, Birmingham, Richmond, San Antonio, New Orleans, and Long Beach, California are all airports in the program. So we'll keep you posted on that as it moves along.
Congratulations to you.
Thank
And I'm pleased that your organizations are focusing on increasing leadership. You know, like you say, jobs is one thing,
Right.
but then getting involved with the leadership, not only just the salaries, but the experience that you get and the commitment from those leaders. So glad that you're doing that. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
I appreciate your presentation too. A lot of good news that we'll certainly share with the public. But I'm glad that you had an opportunity to come here for the people who want to see it. To see what's going on positively. Council members, any questions? That's what I call an efficient presentation. When everything has been addressed, when there's only positive news, and congratulations on the new flights that are taking place and the expansions of our airlines. It's good news. And it's great news, and I certainly hope that those who are watching recognize that this is an example of some of the good continuing news that's in our city.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your presentations. Thanks for the time. At this time, we'll have representatives of RIDE who will come forward. RIDE New Orleans, which campaigns for equitable transportation. They have a report that members of the council you have. It's hot off the presses. So they'll give us a brief, up to 15-minute presentation. If we'll have any questions.
For the changing of the slides, is it just the arrows? Or this should work too. Okay, thank you. Do you want to do the slide present, the clicker slide? Cool. Thanks, Sam. Good afternoon, council members.
Good afternoon.
Thank you so much for inviting us to give you some updates on some work that we're doing. We're going to stick with the theme of keeping it positive. We've got some exciting things coming down the pipeline that we're happy to share. Before I do so, my name is Courtney Jackson, the Executive Director of RIDE New Orleans, and next to me is our Policy Director, Sam Buckley. We're going to start with Zero Fares, our youth pilot initiative that we are very excited to say is in its creation stage. This is an exciting development. As you all know, $2.5 million of ARP money was given to the Regional Transit Authority, and them, along with RIDE New Orleans, the Children and Youth Planning Board and New Orleans Public Library are going to be partnering in ensuring that we have a program that will work for Opportunity Youth, that is ages 16 to 24, to have access for 1 year with our pilot program for zero free fare. Again, we are in our creation stage. We're very excited that we actually have one of our youth ambassador hires that will be helping us build the narrative to make sure that the language is accessible, and we're creating programs that will mean that the implementation will be seamless. One of our ambassadors, Lola, is joining us today, first day civic engagement. We're super excited about that. The goal of this program is to create something that will be sustainable, that can live a long time, and also have enough data to share that shows that it deserves to have continued funding. If you have any questions, we're happy to answer, but again, we are in the creation stage and we're very excited about it.
What are you aiming for in terms of rollout?
Rollout, we're aiming for summer, late summer, fall for rollout.
And you're working closely with the RTA?
We are working with the RTA, yes. They've been extremely cooperative with all of our ideas, and so we're very happy to have them as partners.
That's good news. Members of the council, congratulations.
Right,
If
yes.
it works out. It should have, look, I can look at my president and say it probably should have worked out a little earlier, but we're moving in the right direction. Let's see what happens at the end of the summer. Okay, go ahead.
Our next project that we're really excited to talk with you about is our Better Bus Stops campaign. The Committee for a Better New Orleans is working with us at RIDE and the RTA to transform our transit stops. We're looking to create an equitable transit stop experience that really is centered in rider dignity. The three things that we're going to be focusing on are going to be design, process improvement, and ultimately being able to go for that federal funding to support rolling out an equitable transit stop system. Right now, we are in the needs assessment phase. We have done an extensive project with RTA participants and a lot of volunteers to take a look at all 2,000 bus stops here in Orleans Parish. We were able to see what has a stop, what doesn't have what has a shelter, what has a bench, what doesn't have a sidewalk. And now we have a very clear view of what we're working with, and we're really excited to have that. We are also going to be we are also doing a survey as well. We have been on buses, we have been at major transfer stations and have given the riders an opportunity to have a very extensive conversation with us about their experience. We, I believe, have shared the survey that we're giving out in multiple languages, and we are also looking to get help with our social media campaign as well. So if we share it, we'd very much appreciate if you guys can share our survey as well. We're hoping to get 500 surveys so that we have a very clear data set. We're excited that we're very close to that. We are moving into our stakeholder phase very soon so that we have a holistic engagement process so we know what we need to be working with and that we're doing this in the most equitable way possible.
Okay.
Finally, and I'm going to be handing this over to my policy director, Sam Buckley. About 2 weeks ago, we released a funding report that we feel will lead us in the positive direction as it relates to how we're funding transit. As you all know, transit is extremely important, but for us to get the transit system that our regions deserve, we have to have a conversation with how we're funding it. Right now, we're seeing a lot of capital investments, and that's all very, very exciting. We need to talk about how we're funding it as it relates to operations. Our policy director, in coordination with other folks here in the city, put together an extensive report, and I'm going to hand it over to Sam to give you kind of a breakdown, the 30-second spiel, which will probably be definitely more than 30 seconds, on what we're looking to achieve with an extensive funding opportunities.
Thank you, Courtney. So this is an abbreviated version of a presentation we gave a couple of weeks ago when we released our funding report. We were grateful to have Councilmember Green at the rollout of that report. But we have copies of this here, and for the audience, if anyone wants one. But in this report, we're talking about some of our current regional transit needs in terms of funding, and then also what RIDE thinks would be a vision for what we could do to expand and grow transit into a more robust system based on the RTA's transportation priorities over the next few years. So RIDE was founded as an organization to advocate for creating world-class transit for the city, meaning having a transit system that's not just there as kind of a baseline service, but something that is really viable and something that a lot of people can use and creates real opportunities for New Orleans residents who don't have access to a car. One of the metrics we've consistently tracked over the years is job accessibility, where we compare the number of jobs in the core of Greater New Orleans, Orleans, Jefferson, and St. Bernard that you can get to in an hour by taking the bus or streetcar versus how many jobs you can access if you're driving. And within an hour, you can basically get to anywhere in Greater New Orleans from a car. If you're taking transit and you're an Orleans Parish resident, you can only get to about 35% of the region's jobs on public transit right now. So this is and this varies a little bit year to year, and we use this to track improvements and changes to the system, but the overall story structurally, it has not changed substantially in many years. And this didn't used to be the case in New Orleans. We used to have a much more robust transit system. A lot of people, even who don't ride transit now, remember taking the bus growing up, remember us having a really robust bus system. Before Hurricane Katrina, we had one of the largest and most well-used transit systems in the United States for a city our size. If you were in Orleans Parish, what this map is showing is how, if you were walking to a bus stop, what's the average wait time between buses. So most of Orleans Parish, you would have a bus like coming every 10 minutes within walking distance of your home. After Katrina, this is where we are now. So there's been a really significant drop in the level of service in most parts of the city. In many areas, you're waiting 30 minutes or 60 minutes for a bus, or sometimes even longer. So the reason we've gone from there to here is for a few reasons, and most of them are structural leading up to the COVID-19 pandemic. The Hurricane Katrina destroyed most of the region's bus fleet. So before Hurricane Katrina, we had about 300 buses in peak service that the RTA could use. Now that's down to less than 100. It was a similar story in Jefferson Parish. So the overall fleet size governed the amount of service we could be running. And there was this really dramatic drop in service after Katrina, about 40% of the mileage of service each year that we've never recovered from. Another big issue over the past 15 years has been rising operating costs for transit service. It's gotten more expensive to just run bus and streetcar service, and that's been that price has been rising faster than the cost of inflation. And that's not just a New Orleans trend, that's a national trend, but the result of that is that the revenue we have available for transit operations locally is not covering as much as it used to. And then the final thing, and the biggest factor, is that there simply hasn't been really any new investment in operations for transit in either Orleans or Jefferson Parish for a long time. And so regionally, we have kind of a pot of funding that's been set aside for transit. In Orleans Parish, that's primarily sales taxes. And that's kind of been the funding mechanism for transit operations since the RTA was founded. And because those revenues are not keeping track with the cost of service, if you adjust for the cost of service, we're actually spending less for transit operations now than we were in 2006, immediately after Katrina. So on top of those issues, we have the COVID-19 pandemic, which took a bad situation and made it worse. There was a really significant drop in ridership that impacted the RTA's fare revenue significantly. In 2019, the RTA generated about $17 million self-generated in fare revenue. That dropped by more than half during the pandemic, and it slowly started to recover, but it's still well below where it was beforehand. The RTA also had the same issues that the city had in terms of sales tax revenues dropping that really impacted its fiscal health. For the past few years, the RTA has been able to sustain operations for the most part with federal pandemic relief funds, but those funds are going to expire soon or be used up soon. So in December, the RTA released financial projections, 5-year financial projections for running just existing service without any increases or improvements. And their projection is that there's going to be about $16.5 million funding shortfall by 2028. About $7.5 million of that is for Algiers Point ferry operations, and the other $9 million is to run bus, streetcar, and paratransit service. So this is just the baseline of funding that would need to be identified just to keep things as they are now. So this is not an ideal situation. What has been identified as an issue post-pandemic in some other cities that have been dealing with the same issues is the concept of a transit death spiral, where service keeps getting worse. Fewer people ride the bus unless they absolutely have to, so fare revenues drop. And so there's this spiral where you have worse and worse service and lower ridership, and this gradual decline of the system. That's obviously something we very much want to avoid here. Transit plays a really important role for a lot of Orleans Parish residents. Almost 1 in 5 households don't have access to a car. Having quality transit, it could be really transformative for many areas of the city and many people in the city. So what we'd like to do and what we want to bring to the public's attention and to elected officials' attention is the concept of growing the system and building ridership through growing the system. The report we released identifies a scenario and some high-level cost estimates for what it would take to grow transit service to about 14 million vehicle revenue miles a year. And this figure would get us roughly back to where we were before Hurricane Katrina in terms of overall transit service. We didn't pick that number for that reason, but I think it's a good illustration for people who are familiar with the bus system before Katrina of the scale of investment we're talking about. And making those kinds of investments could be really transformative in terms of how useful the system is and how many people would benefit from it. Our projection is that for Orleans Parish residents, job access regionally would jump from about 35% of all the jobs in Greater New Orleans to more than 50%. This is how that plays out visually. You can see job access. On the left is the number of jobs you can access by census block group from different parts of Orleans and Jefferson Parish. Now, the map on the right is showing how that would change under the growth network. So you would see really significant improvements in all areas of the city, New Orleans East, Algiers, the core of New Orleans, as well as in Jefferson Parish. And then this also shows, for context, how access to frequent service would improve. So the scenario we developed basically incorporates 3 things. The first is that we would increase service on existing bus lines based on the New Links network plan that was released in 2021, which identified a transit growth scenario. So this would give most people in Orleans Parish access to bus service or streetcar service coming at least every 10 minutes. The second thing this scenario incorporates is implementing BRT service. So this includes the cost of implementing the bus rapid transit preferred alternative that was endorsed last year. It also includes the cost in Jefferson Parish of running BRT service between the airport and downtown. The third thing this scenario incorporates is increasing transit operating speeds by putting out bus priority infrastructure, bus lanes, signal priority, other things that make it possible for transit to move faster. What this chart is showing is essentially how the average operating speed for transit in the 100 largest U.S. cities, as measured by total vehicle miles per year divided by hours per year. That red bar all the way at the right is New Orleans. So we are, unfortunately, right now, we have the slowest transit system in the United States. A lot of that is because of how much service is tied up in the streetcar network and just because streetcars run much slower than buses. But we also have relatively slow bus service, and improving operating speeds with some targeted investments through BRT and through just other investments that make it possible for bus and streetcar service to move faster would make a big difference. So we've taken this scenario and we've built out some cost and looked at some potential funding sources for transit operations. The important things that we're trying to highlight for policymakers are the federal government right now doesn't fund the cost of running bus and streetcar service. So we want to make improvements to transit. We can get grants for capital projects, but we can't get the same grants for just running bus and streetcar service. So those funds are going to have to come from Orleans Parish or from the state government. the cost of doing all of those improvements and covering the current deficit for the RTA would be about $45 million a year by 2028. Some of that could be covered by just increasing bus and streetcar speeds, because that would significantly decrease the cost of service. If you run a bus 50% faster, you only have to pay for half as much service, and that could be reinvested in other parts of the system. But in addition to that, there will need ultimately to be some revenue coming in, either from the city or from the state, to expand transit service. We identified some potential funding sources. None of these are meant to be recommendations or specific items, but I think they give some context for the amount of funding that could be raised through different mechanisms if the city and the RTA want to move forward with growing the transit system. Some of the options that could be considered are instituting a millage for transit, or rededicating an existing expiring millage to transit. If the city was able to secure additional funding from the state, particularly for ferry operations, that could put a significant dent in operating cost. Right now, we get one of the lowest subsidies per capita from the state for transit of any state in the country. I think it's 43rd out of 50 states in terms of per capita transit subsidies. One item that we looked at that's come up in other discussions about dedicated transportation funding is increasing parking taxes. Increasing the current off-street parking tax from 3 cents to 10 cents could raise potentially $11 million a year for transit operations. Or the city could potentially look at allocating funding from the general funds for transit, which many cities do. A lot of cities have a line item in the budget for transit operations that goes through the standard budgeting process, and the city could potentially institute something similar. We have more information about this in the report and executive summary. We also have a portal on our website that has a significant amount of additional information on the growth scenario and funding costs. And we appreciate the council's time and are happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Thank you for the presentation. Could you go back to before I go to other council members, to the growth vision, the service speed improvements? It says here that New Orleans operates its system at 10.3 miles an hour. Mm-hmm. Can you just explain that a little bit more in terms of layman's terms? I don't want them to see buses going down the street saying, oh, they should be going slower or whatever it is. Just explain that calculation. So
that's an average of all of the service that the RTA runs, their bus service and their streetcar service. So we take all of the mileage of service that the RTA runs in a year and divide it by the total hours of service that they run in a year. Those are both metrics that transit agencies have to report to the federal government, so we have them for every transit agency in the country and can cross-compare them. But you're right, it's not so much that the buses themselves are going slowly, but a lot of this is because of how slow streetcar service is and how often streetcars tend to get tied up in traffic. And that brings our overall average down a lot.
Okay. It's just important that the public understand, and also that the media understand. Whenever they see a statistic that has New Orleans as an outlier, they kind of run with it. Council President Moreno.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Good to see you all. First, let me start by saying that this is really just an excellent presentation. I very much appreciate this type of data and information that you all had provided, not only identifying the issues that RTA currently faces, but also giving us some potential options for solutions. And that's very important to us as policymakers and legislators to receive that type of information. I just really have a couple questions for you all. Going back to the frequency maps from 2005 to 2023, the difference is just, I mean, it's shocking. It really is. Over this period of time, is there another time when it's been this bad, or is this the worst that it's ever been? I'm just trying to understand where we are in this roughly 20-year time period.
So it was much worse immediately after Hurricane Katrina, and then there was this kind of gradual recovery, and then because of the pandemic and related issues, we took a couple of steps back in the past couple of years. So we're not at the worst we've ever been, but we're also not even at the best of where we've been following Katrina, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. Yeah, it does make sense. I appreciate that. I also want to talk about just the data that you're providing. I think it's really important. And I think it would be really important to have real-time dashboards. You all have already pretty much gathered all this data. Does your website have kind of real-time dashboards up?
We've been building those. We are in the process
Yeah.
of building those out right now.
Look
actually.
at you, Courtney. You already thought of it. Yeah. Yes.
Amazing
So
stuff.
we have interactive versions of a couple of these maps up already. We're also building out some dashboards that have more information about the funding scenarios and some of the underlying cost projections that I think will hopefully be helpful to policymakers and the public, and just having context for where those numbers are coming from.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful, and not only, of course, to policymakers, but to the public as a whole. And then I think also, to build out, even more specific information potentially about the bus infrastructure, like, how many buses, are currently in service, and also what's happening, if you can, even operations-wise within the RTA, how many vacancies are we looking at? All of those things, I think, are really important for the public to be able to see. We've been on the city council side building up dashboards like crazy on a variety of different levels and entities, and you can find those on our city council website. So I just, once again, thank you for your work, whatever that we can do to help you all to continue to increase data and information, and I'd love to collaborate with you all as we work through the funding pieces, and overall just work to improve service, because I hear it all the time. What you all are hearing, we're hearing everywhere we go. I mean, there are many complaints about late buses and not being able to get to where people need to be and get there on time. Numerous complaints about being late to work. People now having to take screenshots of when their bus actually arrives so that they can show their employers. Like, it's really becoming a significant issue. So thank you all so much for your work.
Thank you very much,
Councilmember.
Councilmember Moreno. Councilmember Harris.
I echo Council President's comments about a dashboard. I think that would be really helpful. I do have questions about the frequency 2005 versus 2023. As we all know, the population has shrunk and shifted since Hurricane Katrina. Are you taking in, when you talk about growing New Orleans transit, taking into consideration the movement of the population into other areas and the shrinking population when we talk about bus speeds?
Mm-hmm. So that's a really good point. And one of the things I think is, we certainly are not trying to rebuild the pre-Katrina network exactly as it was, because there have been really significant population shifts. A lot of the frequency improvements that are in the growth scenario were built on the New Links plan that was released a couple of years ago, which was intended to reorient some of the bus lines to do better service in areas that have been growing. We've been approaching this with the perspective that, with the understanding that we do have a declining population, we don't want to treat that as something that is an external issue that we can't change, right? We would like for New Orleans to be prosperous and grow. Our position is that having quality transportation is something that a lot of people who might be interested in moving into the city are going to want to see, and that this is having high quality public transit is a way to sell ourselves as a community and hopefully reverse some of that decline.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that. I think having cities like New York City, where I took the bus all the time, other cities have reliable transportation. Bus comes one after the other. But my question really goes to, are you studying where those population shifts are so that we can reroute buses to make sure that the right areas are getting service, and where there's less demand, basically, that those lines are being dissolved? Or maybe this is an RTA question, I don't know.
So that's the short answer is yes.
Okay.
But yes, that's very much a consideration. And as the RTA is building, in a scenario where we have this funding and the RTA can build out service, it doesn't have to look exactly like this. And certainly there should be 5 years from now, wherever we are, the RTA should be looking at how, like where housing is being built and making service adjustments that way. But having the resources to do that, I think, creates a lot more options for service.
And did I hear you right that there were 300 buses pre-Katrina, and now there are about 100 buses? Is that correct?
That's correct.
What was the funding model like before Katrina? Is it different than what it is now?
So that's sort of the very short backstory is that the RTA, when it was spun off from NOPSI, which is the company that became Energy, they had a significant amount of residual funding that they were drawing from and assets that they had inherited from NOPSI that they were still using. And when Hurricane Katrina destroyed most of our bus fleet, we didn't have the assets in place to replace all of those assets.
Okay. I do want to turn to the Better Bus Stops project. How are you identifying these bus stops that need to be better?
We actually just completed an inventory, a facilities inventory of every bus and streetcar stop in the city that's looking at existing shelters and existing benches and other facilities. So we do have a good start, and that's also going to be something we're putting up on our dashboard soon. But that's our starting point, and then we want to take that and compare it with ridership data to see where there's big discrepancies. And like we have many riders here, but there's only a bench or there's nothing at all. So the part of the goal of this project too is to look at different types of facilities that might be appropriate in different neighborhoods. If you're uptown and there's a lot of tree cover, for example, it might be less important to be looking at shade elements than if you're somewhere in New Orleans East where there's no tree cover. But we just completed this within the past couple of days, so we're excited to be digging into the baseline inventory and seeing what we see.
And you're looking at existing bus shelters. Are you looking at areas that need bus shelters? Yes. Okay. And I asked this question because I've been requesting a shelter in front of the Mardi Gras Indian Council building for like 3 years because there are kids who wait there, there are elderly people who wait there, and there's no shelter from the elements. So they're just sort of hanging out either by the buildings or just trying to find shelter anywhere. So if you could add that to your list, I'd be grateful. And then as far as better, are you thinking about using any local artists or anything to assist with making these shelters better?
You're basically talking about what our meetings have been about. Yeah, it's process and design and making sure that we are having a holistic collaboration, and that's why we're working with Committee for a Better New Orleans as well, and collaborating with the RTA. Yeah, it's a good group of people.
Great, thank you.
Well, thank you, Courtney Jackson, Ms. Courtney Jackson, and Mr. Buckley.
I do have
Oh, you have a question? Okay, Councilmember King.
I was late to sign in. I was late.
It's all right.
Okay. All right. This may be a RTA question, but if it is, I'll ask them as well. You mentioned some funding shortages. I know.
Oh, okay.
This past year, I think the state gave, I forget how many millions for the Algiers ferry, and the city gave a couple millions as well. That's really not sustainable to get. I think it was maybe 10. How much was it? If you could.
13?
It was 10 million, and then they're projecting about $7 million a year going forward is what the funding gap is.
Right. So that's kind of tough to ask every year from the state, especially in the climate our state is in Baton Rouge, and to get money from the city. So you mentioned some suggestions. One was a millage. One was adding tax to parking. Now, I know before there was an abundance of funding from a ferry, from the toll. The tolls paid for the ferry. The ferry was free. The ferry was you could bring your car on the ferry, and it all came from the tolls. So is it realistic or reasonable, instead of asking for a millage, which is a tax, which a toll is a tax, and increasing the parking, which is a tax, just to bring the a toll bridge back, the toll booths back?
So that's a really good question. The way that the tolls are set up, because Because the toll would be on a bridge it's a state facility, we would need the legislature and DOTD to support the tolls in order to bring those back. And that would run into a lot of the same issues that we would have with other asks that we might be making with the state legislature right now, which is that it's not a particularly good political environment to come to the state and ask for funding. That's certainly something we would support looking into, because of course the tolls there was a lot more ferry service back when there were tolls and service was free to Algiers residents. We would certainly support that as one potential funding source for transit operations.
Well, I understand politically it may not make sense for a legislator to request this, but would it make just common sense to have a tolls instead of taxing everybody? It's like dancing around the issue, taxing, adding to the parking, a millage. I mean, you got people from all over different parishes crossing the bridge multiple times a day, so they come to the city, they enjoy our city. Does that make sense? Am I just being ridiculous asking for it?
We completely agree.
Okay, so if it is ridiculous, I'm not by myself.
We're
Being ridiculous.
part of our issue, and as you all know, is that we're boxed in a lot of ways in terms of the funding that we can get locally for anything without going to the state in some way, where there's a lot of revenue sources that from a policy perspective are really sound, but they're not allowed by the state constitution, or we need to go ask the state permission. So it's definitely a political challenge for the city, but from a policy perspective, it's something we really support and would think is worth the ask with the legislature, to the extent that the political will is there.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentations.
Thank you.
And let us know how we can help as a council. I do appreciate your suggestions, just like Council President Moreno said, relative to potential, solutions and revenue sources, and we'll look at it. And Councilman King, that's a very good question. Maybe the governor, since he wants to really see New Orleans shine and look like other cities, can potentially talk about funding for entities such as this,
I think it makes sense. They use our bridge. Why not?
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Councilmember,
all.
we have one online.
Oh, we have
comment.
one online question. You told me too. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Okay, this is from Susie Trenka. She says, I'm writing in support of RIDE's vision for growing public transit in Greater New Orleans, as outlined in the organization's excellent report, Why Public Transit Must Grow. I urge the Transportation Committee and the entire City Council to follow RIDE's recommendations and to do everything in their power to secure funding for expanded in-transit service.
Thank you very much for that online comment, and thank you for reminding me that it was there. And I can assure her that the City Council takes very seriously the need to fund public transportation, and I encourage everyone to read the report, a great report. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Council members, the last item on the agenda prior to adjournment, unless the agenda is altered, is the discussion on the Regional Transit Authority's 2023 annual report, the capital investment program, and to rider engagement efforts. And the presenter is Ms. Lona Edwards Hankins, the Chief Executive Officer of Regional Transit Authority. Thank you for being here, Ms. Hankins. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Hello. Come on.
Good morning.
Ms. Hankins, if you could identify for the public who is with you today, and thank you for being here today.
Good afternoon. My name is Lona Edwards Hankins. I'm the CEO of the Regional Transit Authority, and I have here today my board chair, Mr. Mark Raymond Jr., and my Chief Financial Officer, Giselle Johnson Banks.
Thank you all for being here today.
You're welcome. So I wanted to share with you guys a recap of 2023 and the exciting things we did in 2023 and what we have planned for 2024. So as you may recall, we cut the ribbon on the Canal Street Ferry Terminal project in 2023. It was a project that had been open since 2014, and we were able to close that out in 2023. We were also able to secure $100 million in federal grants, and since 2019, that brings the total to about $160 million in competitive federal grants that the agency really did not seek prior to 2019 and becoming 100% starting the management program. So the other thing we did in 2023 was order 29 buses. The earlier discussion about the fleet and the fleet size in 2005, it is important to note how the agency received recovery dollars and insurance dollars for its fleet. You know, unlike a building that is 100% damaged, FEMA and the insurance company will give you that replacement cost. Because these were rolling assets, they gave us the depreciated value. So if a bus was still on the street in 2000, that was a 1990 vehicle, 2005, that was a 1990 vehicle, you got pennies on the dollars for it. So that was the challenge. We only got enough money from FEMA in its work in 2000 to buy the vehicles that we bought, which was probably about 100, 120, maybe 150 vehicles. The other thing is, as part of our grant, we were able to secure, so we paid for these new vehicles that we just ordered in 2023 with ARPA dollars, as well as community leftover Katrina Rita Community Development Block grants, because the RTA was not a recipient of any of those dollars when those dollars were being doled out to the school systems and housing and other agencies. So we made a case to OCD at the state that said, if you have any leftover dollars in order to meet your deadline, we can spend those dollars relatively quickly. So we're able to get about $5 million from the state of leftover Katrina Rita dollars in order to meet their deadlines to expend. The image that you see here is a recent image of the buses being manufactured, and they're being manufactured up in Minnesota. And so the other thing we've done is we did a Pause, Breathe campaign, and you may see this beautiful image on our bus shelters, but what's more important is on our vehicles. Mama Sonny Patterson, the poet and healer, does a 15-second pause meditation moment for both our riders and our operators. And New Orleans is not always the easiest place to live in, so it provides our riders a mindful moment to just relax, to try to lower the temperature on our vehicles. And we've seen some improvements and an appreciation for this moment. Service reliability. Yes, there was a discussion earlier about how reliable we are. During the summer, we realized because of the age of our fleet, we needed to order new vehicles, and we had a maintenance shortfall of both technicians and parts. So we started asking the planning team to plan to the vehicles we can provide on the street on a daily basis, because as I cited before, the bulk of our vehicles were purchased in 2008 to 2012. The FTA says the life of a vehicle is only 12 years. So many of these vehicles are at the end of their useful life. And between 2012 and 2018, vehicles weren't ordered. In the transit industry, you order vehicles just about every year or every 2 years to keep your cash flow level. And that did not happen prior to 2018. So that is the reason we are facing this vehicle shortfall right now. We have a plan now to walk our way out of this by pursuing federal grants every year until we have stabilized our fleet. We are about to submit a grant. Thank you, Councilman Green, for signing and submitting a letter of endorsement for that grant to apply for 25 hybrids in this year's FTA's annual call for competitive grants.
Because you brought up the issue, and I usually like to wait until the end, but can you tell the public why the vehicles might not have been ordered? Were there some factors involving the federal government, the process, or just what?
Ordered between the time frame of 2012 and 18.
Yes.
I don't think any of us were there to know.
So it's not something
it's
not something that's obvious. It's
Yeah.
not like they weren't, the transportation officials weren't, no manufacturing supply chain distribution.
I don't believe it was, I just don't know that.
Because you would think that, that's not a number that you kind of make up. You just know that after 12 years, you're going to need another vehicle. So for 6 years, it would be problematic that there weren't applications, that's all.
Yeah.
So there's no real reason that's obvious. All right, that's fine. Okay.
So I know many of you get calls about the Rampart Street project. We have reopened the canal line just in time for French Quarter Fest. So the Canal Streetcar line now goes all the way to the river. We are in the final stages of starting to train our operators and testing the Rampart Street car line, and we anticipate that being online no later than early June, weather permitting and all the other cautions that we can set. One of the major things that we're doing is improving our rider amenities. The downtown transit center, we anticipate issuing an RFP later this year. We've received last year a $25 million federal grant, so an RFP to hire a design consultant so that we can start the community engagement process. That locally preferred alternative will be at the corner of Canal and Basin, where the transfer station has always been. It just hasn't been a physical building in the last 50 years. But many of us who went to high school in New Orleans know that that was the exchange point, and it was the exchange point up until the Hard Rock Cafe collapsed when we had to move it to Duncan Plaza. So we plan to reinstitute it in that location, build a building in the neutral ground that will allow our riders to get in and out of the elements, the first time in our 40-year history that we're going to have an indoor facility for riders. But it will need to be outfitted for the future. So how do we make sure we are building a microgrid, so in the event power goes out, we can work with our neighbors to provide them fuel when the power goes out, as well as become an indoor cooling station in the event we need it. So how do we make sure the community gets the best out of this facility? So those are the plans for that project, and we hope to work with the Finance Authority of New Orleans to help us build out some of that alternative fuel, alternative powering, green bonds, and to pay for some of those extras that the grant may not pay for. We also have a mobility hub project, and this is to take a look at those major thoroughfares, those large where we have transactions, ridership transfers happening, Broad and Canal, Carrollton and Claiborne, the New Orleans East Library. How do we make that safer for pedestrians such that the one that I like to cite because it is the most obvious to me, if you think about Carrollton and Claiborne and going from New Orleans to Jefferson, a rider has to cross 6 lanes of traffic to get from the streetcar to the bus. Again, 6 lanes of traffic. How do you make that more pedestrian friendly and safer for our riders? So we are in the process of programming that and working with the local architecture firm to help us decide based on ridership what types of amenities. It also partners into what the conversation Ride just had about the better shelter. So all of that data will be taken into effect. The Algiers Terminal Renovation Project. Thank you, Councilman King, for providing some input on how to best reach your community. We held 2 listening sessions with the Algiers community, one at the Algiers Library and one at the terminal, to understand what they want. This is another project that has been funded. We have an architect that's on board, and the plan is to add a 2nd floor to this building to maximize efficiencies. The interior ceiling is a 2-story ceiling, but if we add a 2nd floor, we can add administrative offices and then potentially open up the 1st floor for some sort of community use, and what that means to activate the space and drive economic value for that community. And then our shelter project. So we have installed to date 11 of the 25 that are programmed for with this budget. We get, our board has given us $500,000 a year to build out shelters. What we need to do, and what we're working with the data that RIDE and Committee for a Better New Orleans are collecting, is to build a robust shelter program such that there's a FTA grant that we can go for called Protect that will allow us to have an ongoing annual program to build out shelters. How do we design it such that not only artists, but the local New Orleans economy, rather than buying a shelter off the shelf that is prefabricated in California or somewhere else, perhaps our local small business community can then manufacture it here. And now, again, we are using this to not only provide great accommodations for our riders, but an economic development project for a small DBE to manufacture and help us maintain these shelters over time. And then lastly, I want to talk about some rider engagement. When we did our service change in January to right-size our service to become more reliable based on the maintenance issues and the amount of fleet we can actually deliver on a daily basis, we did a survey of riders to see what they were thinking in January. So we got the before. We've gone back out to the riders right now that is active for the next 2 weeks. So we're encouraging riders to go on our website, go on the app, and answer these survey questions that we have so that we can gauge whether or not we've improved, in addition to the data that we collect on a monthly basis and present to our board on a monthly basis about service delivery and on-time performance. So that is, we want to hear from the riders again on how we can improve. The other thing that we're doing is a code of conduct, trying to create a code of conduct for our riders. We often, have a challenge with rider behavior, right? And it's never a large percentage. It's only a few bad actors, just like we know in our communities. Only a few people who will throw trash on the ground, but it's the same people all the time that leave trash on the vehicles, how they perform. So one of the things we're looking to do is kind of establish the code of conduct with our riders, with our operators, so that we can better enforce and correct ourselves, correct our community in an appropriate manner if we need to. And with that, I'll pause for questions.
Well, before questions, Council, if I could, I just want to add a few things. First, I want to thank Sam and Courtney for the great presentation that they gave. We loved working with the stakeholders and our partners And what I think you saw was a presentation about a little bit of an overview of the history, where we are, but also the potential, right, of what we could do if we had more funding, and if we could expand regionally and provide more opportunity to our riders. Another thing to really highlight is our fleet, right? We know that we've had some challenges, but I want to just clarify that prior to COVID, we were on pace in replacing vehicles that were at the end of their useful life, i.e. you see the nice new branded buses, the gray and the purple on the streets, that were pacing the current aging out fleet. And COVID and supply chain shortages kind of exacerbated the situation that we have currently, to the point where we've adjusted our on-time delivery in the beginning of this year to be more accurate and actually communicate the right timing on when buses will be at the bus stop. Lastly, speaking specifically to the downtown transit center that will come, Councilman King, I know we want to work specifically with you and Representative Knox to make sure that the concerns of the community are being met as we are going through the design and delivery of a downtown transit center. But we've heard that people have had issue with the transit center being there. So having their voices at the table and mitigating concerns as we're building this is really paramount, I think, in the success of what the downtown transit center will be.
Thank you. I know our council members are going to have questions. I do have a couple of questions for you before we move to Council President Moreno. Could you discuss, because it's not here, the regional and regional transit authority and what we can do to enhance regional cooperation and participation, and just allay the fears of the public relative to what we've heard and seen relative to regional participation?
Sure, I can address some of that. So if the lines that we run regionally will continue to run regionally. So the number 3 that goes all the way into Elmwood and services Elmwood will continue to run into Elmwood. We also have a line that goes, 2 lines that go down into St. Bernard. That will continue. We have the lines that go into the West Bank. Those lines will continue to operate in the same manner that they operate today. We currently, under contract, a CEA, operate the Kenner line on their behalf and have done that since the early 80s. And it's my understanding that Jefferson Parish wants to take that back. We are okay with them taking that back. They pay us to do that. If they choose to pay JET to do that, that's actually, okay with us. The other thing that we're working through with, we'll be working through with the Jefferson Parish is coordinating better around how we deliver paratransit services. So currently today, it's a one-way trip, and that is inefficient for the customers. So the customer is required to now call 2 agencies to make their trip. And so what we're advocating for, based on a study that the RPC commissioned, is for, based on the residency of the person needing paratransit, we would do a round service trip. And so we're working with Jefferson to clarify that via an MOU. And then lastly, we still provide Jefferson Parish services for Ride Line. When it was Transdev and Transdev operated both entities, the corporation decided that the RTA would do that on their behalf. For the last 3 years, since we've been 100% government, we've done that on their behalf. But now, since there's this pullout, we're going to have to figure out, again, like how we cost share for security that they're providing at the Wiltie Terminal in Gretna on a per vehicle or per person basis. I don't know how we're going to come to that, but we will work through that, and how they want to handle the calls. We're costing all of this out so that when and if they go forward with the actual pullout, it should not affect our riders. It should not affect operations. It's just a matter of, because the original enabling legislation allowed them to opt in or opt out. It just didn't clarify how the opt out would occur. So if you go back into the original enabling legislation written in the late 70s, early 80s, more parishes could opt in. Jefferson was the only one that opted in. We do not get any revenue from Jefferson to operate our transit authority, nor do we give them any revenue because we're going into our lines. The federal revenue that we both get is based on revenue miles or passenger count, so it's a formulaic approach. We do get mileage because we're operating Kenner for preventative maintenance on the vehicles, so that would then go to Jefferson if they're going to operate it.
Okay, and I may have questions at the end. I'll go to Council President Moreno.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon to all of you. Let me just kind of stay where you're at. Obviously, we've been seeing with what happened with the Jefferson Parish members. They no longer want to be part of the board. There's legislation by Representative Stagney to allow the Jefferson Parish folks to get off the board. So what's the latest with the board? Can you all conduct business at this time? What's happening with the appointees? When's the last time that you met? When do you plan to meet again? When is everything going to get back on track?
So,
I'll take that.
Okay.
Everything will be back on track at this month's board meetings. I think it's April 23rd. President Shing appointed 3 members so that we will be able to conduct business, and I believe former Chairman Flozell Daniels will be coming through you guys. Hopefully, was governmental affairs yesterday?
It was canceled.
It had to be canceled because of the weather, but it's coming up.
Will the agenda items from that go to next week's council?
Yes.
Okay, then we'll have a full board at this coming meeting.
Okay, perfect. So it was the 1 Orleans member and the 3 Jefferson.
Yes.
And so that'll be taken care of. So you'll be able to conduct business at, what's the next meeting that you said?
April 23rd,
April 23rd is your next meeting. When was the last time you had a meeting?
February 27th?
February 27th, got it. All right, and look, unfortunately, I do have to ask some of the hard questions of what we've been seeing in the news. And I understand due to the fact that there are investigations happening that you may not be able to answer all of them. But what is the latest with BRC Construction Group, the group that was kind of in the center of potentially getting additional monies without proper board approval?
So we have not paid the vendor as of yet. We're waiting on details related to their invoices. All of that was caught as it was going through our processes. And now we're putting corrections in place to make sure situations like that never happen again.
Yeah, and that's that was going to be my follow-up. So what's being done to make sure that this doesn't happen again?
Lona, you want to speak specific to the internal checks and balances, or Giselle?
Sure. I can speak to it. Good evening. Afternoon. Council.
Yeah, afternoon, yeah.
So we have a robust procurement policy that we currently have in place. Our internal audit report did find that our procurement policies were able to catch a lot of what happened, and so those checks and balances are there. What we are looking at in terms of policy and recommendations from our internal audit report is making sure that we look more at the departmental level and making sure that task orders and things are done prior to getting to the final approval stage. We actually caught, in terms of the PO, we actually caught payments that were trying to come through that exceeded the value of the PO, and that's how we were able to uncover what happened. And so from there, we are strengthening our internal procurement policies, making sure that we also look at our progressive discipline policies and make sure that we are adhering to that, and anybody that is found in violation of those policies will follow that progressive discipline policy. Procurement is also working hand in hand with internal audit to make sure that they're doing spot checks periodically throughout the procurement processes. And so looking at some random contracts, pulling those, making sure that all the rules are followed. I think that will get us where we need to be.
Got it, okay. There's also other pieces of legislation also dealing with the board. Representative Boyd is also trying to work on some important reforms within the RTA. Your position on Representative Boyd's bill?
We're working with Representative Boyd to make sure that all of her concerns are met in oversight and clarity for issues like this. I believe the bill has moved beyond the House and now going to the Senate committee.
Yeah.
So we look forward to continuing to work with her.
Yeah, and I think where, I'm obviously not going to speak for Representative Boyd, but I've had conversations with her about her bill. I think what she's trying to accomplish, what all of us really hope to eventually accomplish, is that the reforms will lead to overall better service for the people who RTA serves, the people of New Orleans. And, you know, as we've seen in the RIDE data, and as every council member up here hears from constituents, currently they're very dissatisfied with the service. They're dissatisfied with particularly the tardiness of the buses. It's significantly impacting their lives. And looking at, you know, rides numbers and, you know, them letting us know exactly what it would cost to get us, you know, potentially to where we need to have these expanded services, this roughly $45 million figure by 2028. Do you all agree with those particular numbers? Is that what it looks like?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they got the numbers from us.
Okay, perfect. So one of the things that they were able to provide to us is potential ideas for potential funding sources. They gave us their ideas. What are your ideas for potential funding sources to fill this gap?
So we have a lot of the same ideas, actually. But a big one that we haven't addressed is we haven't changed fares since the 90s. To Councilman King's point about the toll, right, losing funding. But we also took on a state asset with the ferries, and so now working with our legislative partners to identify specific funding streams, you know, it's imperative for the success for the RTA.
Go ahead, you can clarify.
I just want to clarify, the $45 million that RIDE came up with, and I worked with Sam on the numbers, so thanks, Sam, great job. But that includes expanded service, right? And so we have not factored in to our projections the amount of expanded service that Sam did for RIDE. So what he, I think the first numbers you saw were like 16.5 million.
Right.
That is looking at our current service. If we were to operate at full peak service with the New Links implementation that we started back in September of 2022, I believe it was, that does provide for some expanded service, given the recommendations from New Links, and we implemented that. The issues that we're having, of course, are related to fleet and ability to meet that currently expanded service. And so if you look at full peak service for that expanded service under New Links, we should have a $16.5 million deficit. The $45 million that Sam is talking about includes additional expanded service. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yep, I see that. I think what would be helpful to us is if you could provide us information similar to RIDE, where, you know, obviously they have the different deficits, which everyone's on the same page about. But what's great is that they have all of the potential options and solutions. So I'd like to see, you know, if you all have the same ideas, well, then put the same things down. You know, I mean, if you all have new and other ideas, you know, give us those potential ideas to make sure that we narrow that gap or potentially eliminate it. I think that would be helpful to us.
So one more point
Sure.
about Sam's idea in approaching the state. So the statewide transit, Louisiana is a statewide transit association. Shreveport, Baton Rouge, and many of the rurals participate. April the 18th, I believe, is going to be Transportation Day at the state capitol, where the president of that association from Shreveport is taking the lead in kind of starting this awareness campaign about the fact that we are, you know, 43 out of 50 in how our state is funded, and we will be there to support him on that effort, because the rurals are suffering just as much as the urbans are suffering, and if we can increase the asset that has not been raised since the 1990s, the amount that we get from the state, that would be a huge lift for all of us.
Yeah, because every penny counts, and on that every penny counts kind of a vein there, you know, I received many text messages and emails about an article that I saw about $500,000 being spent on executive training. Can you explain that a little bit more and why that, significant amount is going toward executive training?
What would it take? The board has not approved executive training yet. I think we were putting that out to get a broader understanding of how we could train our entire executive team and the director level team. For agencies our side, this is pretty standard for the industry, and I think it was consistent. What we owe New Orleans is the best operating transit system possible. And if getting our employees the training that would enhance that, I think the board would be supportive of that. But figuring out what the right cost for that is important. But two, to give you I think a better frame for an agency our size, it is standard.
Yeah, the American Public Transit Association recommends it for the entire leadership team. So we're just following industry best practices. We are also shifting from a private agency to a public agency. And what does that really mean to be a public agency? How do we become more customer-focused, customer-centric, equity-centric throughout the entire agency? And that culture change, many organizations bring in executive coaching for their leadership team when they're embarking on culture change.
I just want to add to that, this is also something that is smiled on by the FTA when we're submitting grant applications. So going after federal funding.
And I also want to put some context to this. This is a 3-year procurement, so we're talking about $100,000+ per year. So the $450,000 is over the course of 3 years. And that's the estimated cost. We don't know what it is. It's out for bid. And so we'll evaluate those when those bids come in, as Commissioner Raymond stated, but it is over a course of 3 years.
Yeah, I don't think that the opposition is necessarily to there being executive training or additional training of staff. I think there's support for that. I think it's just the amount that it is, particularly since we're talking about an agency where literally every penny counts. So I think that's where we had questions. Certainly, I think it sounds excessive. I think that members of the public think it sounds excessive, particularly since they would like as much money as possible going toward operations of the RTA. So thank you all.
Council Member Leslie Harris.
Thank you. You heard me ask RIDE this. Have you done a study of where routes should be given the decrease in the size of the city and the sort of migration of where people are taking mass transit in and out of the city?
So that was done as part of the 2021-2019 New Links process. And then we also have periodically, when we're doing our service adjustments, and we look at origin destination and data. So we are constantly looking at where new developments are going, the development that's going, River City development. We worked with that developer to make sure it was transit friendly and where it should go. So as often as we can get the information on housing, we're making adjustments to that, yes.
So are you also adjusting routes and frequency based on events? So for example, we know that during weekends, there's an increase of tourist riders on the streetcars. There's an increase of tourist riders on the bus going to Magazine Street, to the Quarter. And sometimes with that increase, that means that normal, regular riders cannot get on the transportation that they rely upon to get to where they're going. Do you increase service or frequency of service based on peak hours?
Yes, we do, and we also have something called a tripper. So if a bus or a streetcar is overcrowded, if we have the extra vehicle, we will put another vehicle on the line. But I have challenged the team specifically on the streetcar during certain times of the year where we see more tourists and more overcrowding. How do we make sure we have the right amount of vehicles on the street?
Well, and that was going to be my next question to you. Rod just said that there were 300 buses back before Katrina. We have about 100 now. What is the optimal amount of buses in your mind to get to where we need to be?
Well, so for regular service that was part of the New Links plan, it's about 120. But this expansion, depending on expansion, we haven't modeled that out yet.
You don't know yet.
Right, we haven't modeled that out yet. When RIDE is talking about improving service, faster service, that's not just vehicles. Some of it is dedicated lanes. Some of it is signal prioritization, things that we will have to work with the city on in order to make sure transit has its proper place in our city, and the city is less car-centric and more like where the balance is.
So, okay, going back to the 120, how many buses are in the process of being built or procured?
So we have 29 on order right now. We have funding for an additional 20 in the electric vehicle grant. And this grant application for 2024 that is open right now and due in a couple of weeks, we will be applying for another 25, and these will be hybrids.
And those will take some old buses out of service, because we have some old buses out there that
Yes.
break down, especially in excessive heat,
Yes,
where we've had reports of last summer, elderly people not being able to get their bus because the bus has been broken down.
correct.
Okay. I want to kind of get into the nitty-gritty of the digital app and the RTA passes. So y'all are relying a lot on the digital passes now. But we know that in our community, a lot of folks who ride the bus, a lot of elderly people don't have smartphones that have the app. What are you doing to make sure that those folks get the information that they need as far as delays and status of buses?
So they can get information when we put out our notices. They can get information. They can call Ride Line if they don't have access to, and that's the best way to get information is to call our Ride Line.
So what I'm hearing from Ride Line, from someone in my office who rides the bus every single day, is that often when they call Ride Line, the customer service person has no idea where the bus is, can't share updated information. So, you know, as we're talking about executive training, are you doing any customer service training to ensure that your folks can answer the questions that are asked of them?
Yes, so we've just, for whatever reason, our Ride Lines agents did not have access to the entire system. They could only see a little bit. So we've just recently uncovered that through communications and problem solving. And so we're looking to expand the amount of information that they can see based on the screens and the technology that they have. So yes.
Okay, and then on the technology, on the app's GPS doesn't apparently work correctly, so that the bus GPS icons don't appear regularly on the map, and riders cannot locate if a bus is near their stop or not. I'm getting this from someone in my office who rides regularly. Are you guys doing any usability testing to determine whether or not your app is accurate and is providing accurate information to bus riders?
Right, so this is an app that we bought off the shelf, right, and uncovered that they did not have the real-time data. And over the last 6 months, we have been improving that data that they have access to and working with that vendor to improve their data access. We aren't the only transit agency that uses this particular vendor, so they're working to improve their delivery of that information.
Do you have a timeline on those improvements?
They roll out like any other app that's refreshed, they roll out regularly.
Okay. You heard me ask Rod about bus stops and bus shelters. Again, this is a city we know from yesterday that experiences heavy rain, excessive heat, termites, I mean, name it, we have it. What are you all doing to improve bus shelters and ensuring that where there are shelters, that they are kept clean, sanitary, that there aren't people necessarily sleeping on them when riders are there?
So let's talk about what we're doing to improve shelters. Part of this grant that RIDE and the Community for Better New Orleans is helping us inform what the shelter of the future will look like. And then internally, we are hiring a firm to help us build out a shelter construction program so that every year we're delivering it. That will set us up to go after an FTA grant called Protect, so that we can start to robustly finance and build shelters, something that has not been in the city for a very long time.
Yeah.
So how do we, but it's a tricky thing, right? Because depending on the business that the shelter goes in front of, the house that the shelter goes in front of, the permitting process, whether or not we're dealing with the city or the state because it's a state road. So it is a complicated, you would think it's not that complicated, but it is a complicated challenge that we will need your assistance to help us when we start to hit these roadblocks.
Look, if I could get a bus shelter at 3rd and LaSalle, I would be delighted. And I know that the Mardi Gras Indian Council would be happy to allow you to put a shelter there because, again, folks are going either to the church or on their building to rest or seek shelter when it's in the successive rain or heat or whatever.
Yeah. And as it relates to the cleanliness of the shelters, we work with the city. The city puts out the trash can. We work with the city to notify when there's a trash issue. As it relates to the homeless, again, we have a person on our staff who's working with your staff to make sure that they're addressing all of those needs.
Do the bus drivers have the capability of reporting, hey, the shelter looks trashy? Or
Yes.
do you have someone who drives around to do that?
Both.
Okay.
It's both and. So we have a stops manager that's dedicated to looking after all of our stops. We're building out that team for him. We also have a roadway crew that periodically goes out and assists the city in the cleanliness of the stops. And the bus driver can report, or the supervisors can report, hey, your front door is dirty.
Okay. All right, that's all I have right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Harris. If there is a bus stop where someone has occupied the bus stop and it's dirty, do you all handle that, or do you call the police or the Office of Homeless Services? Who might be called?
We probably would start with the Office of Homeless Services.
Okay. You work with them, or they just take it from there?
We work with them, but so we work with them in that if we understand that a person is in crisis, right, we'll communicate with them and they take it from there.
Okay. I just wanted to be on the record to tell the public that there's a bus stop at the corner of Elysian Fields and Gentilly where but it's done. So I want to applaud the RTA, the Office of Homeless Services, and the New Orleans Police Department for getting that particular stop cleaned up. And I guess the sanitation department. I want sometimes the public to know how complex matters such as that can be. And you've seen it, obviously you've seen that location, but on 2 occasions, for some reason, that shelter, because it's a little bit larger and you can lay down on the bench, has attracted situation which made it not attractive for others to actually go to the shelter. And we did call the RTA, and the mechanisms were put in place that resulted in person being given attention by also the New Orleans Police Department. Member of the police department, Officer Gelpi, G-E-L-P-I, and I could be wrong with his last name, but I want to applaud him for having a conversation with the person that resulted in the move happening, maybe encouraging that person to get the help that they need instead of being out in the open and in a dangerous situation. So to the RTA and to all those involved with that one, I thank you. I thank you for the presentation today. I mean, it's invaluable. The combination of your presentation with RIDE has us having reason to recognize that we have work to do, but some of it's going to get done. I know one of the biggest challenges is going to be the funding. I encourage you all to continue to make that case with the public, because if you're talking about potential fare increases or you're talking about other matters, the public is going to have to be in tune and may have to vote in some instances. Continue to let them know everything that's going on, and the report that you gave us today and RIDE, let's make sure that the public knows about some of these potential enhancements to the transportation system. We get a lot of complaints that the transportation system is slow. We heard today some reasons that might be the case, but that there is an intent to do what it takes to become more efficient and to expedite travel throughout our city. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Council members, any additional questions? Thank you for being here
have
today.
one online
Sorry. Thank you for always saying that. I just always forget. People who send in online comments, I always want them to be read. I don't want you to think I'm moving forward without them. Yes, thank you for that opportunity.
This is from Terrell J. Broussard, who says Jefferson Parish wants out of the RTA because of conduct that exposes both criminal as well as civil liabilities. Will the City Council demand a review of the procurement process at RTA as a method of rebuilding confidence in RTA. What is the City Council's reaction to these bills that seem to challenge the constitutional authority of the New Orleans City Council? Remember, public transportation is a necessity for many of your constituents.
I appreciate those questions. It could be answered in, I don't necessarily think that the state legislature is challenging our constitutional authority because there are laws that the state of Louisiana is involved with more than us. Just like people think that the Sewage and Water Board is governed by city law. It's not. It's governed by state law. It was created by the state. There are complexities. There is a board. There are processes. There are federal monies involved, federal, state, and local. At the end of the day, we want to work with the RTA and we want to work with other agencies and hope that we can have some regional cooperation to address some of the concerns mentioned by Mr. Broussard, but also that have been mentioned by members of the public. But the City Council is never going to allow itself to be usurped in terms of its constitutional authority, but we also recognize that there are state laws that govern agencies, and that's why you see the state legislators submitting their laws. We want to work with them. We want to get transit done correctly, and we'll cooperate in any way that we can. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved by Councilmember Harris, seconded by Councilmember King. There being no objection, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much. And thank you for the members of the public who watch this meeting and who participate. We're all on the same page.